Some of the statistics and milestones from the prior year. So tonight you have myself and Captain Wells, and we're going to talk to you about 2021, some of those milestones, and also just finally getting through COVID and the pandemic, and looking forward to 2022 and beyond. All right. So what we're going to talk about is who we are. Just talking about, again, as a department, who we are, what we stand for, kind of our mission, vision, and values. We're going to highlight some new programs that were started in 2021 and some programs that we're planning for 2022 and beyond. Some of our key partnerships that we have throughout the community. Highlight some of our different trainings we were able to implement in 2021. Some trainings were new, so we're really excited to share those. Briefly touch on kind of our crime rate and the calls for service in 2021. Talk about our various force responses, and then really highlight our new personnel. We've had quite the turnover in the last, not only in 2021, but in the last 2 years. We had our swearing in and award ceremony last weekend, and that was kind of to make up for a lack of swearing ins in person due to the pandemic, and we swore in 20 people. So a variety of new officers and new promotions, so we're going to highlight those as well. So I'm going to step back, turn it over to Captain Erin Wells, and then we'll kind of just take turns moving through the presentation.
All right. It's the first time doing this. I'm like, hope I do it correctly. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councilors. Thank you for having me tonight. I get the pleasure of talking about several pieces of our police department. I want to start off by talking about kind of what drives us. I think it's important to have a vision, and our vision is to make Redmond the safest community in Oregon. And I know these things are difficult because there's a lot of pieces that go into making that possible. But this is what drives us at the police department, is keeping our citizens safe. So that's our vision, and our mission is service to the community through excellence, professionalism, and teamwork. I could define those, but I thought it might be better to talk just quickly about some examples of that. So excellence is a pretty broad term, but I think you were able to see Officer Uppendahl tonight, and just the excellence it took for an officer to respond to a medical call. I mean, I don't think we typically think of officers and their response as like, hey, they're going to do this amazing job. We do save lives, but we seem to get a lot more press for other things we do. But excellence comes into everything we do. And so we got to see that tonight with Officer Uppendahl. With teamwork, working with the fire department is one way, but also recently we've had a lot of encounters with those experiencing mental health crisis. We're seeing that across the nation, but even in Redmond we tend to see it a lot also. And we work a lot with Deschutes County Behavioral Health and the Mobile Crisis Assessment Team. And recently we had an individual who had multiple police contacts and MCAT contacts, and we just were able to find a real creative solution. And it took a lot of involvement on the police department and their part, but we were able to finally get this person the services they need, and probably saved her life too. So that's a great example of teamwork just that we do in the community. And then professionalism is of utmost importance in what we do every day. And I think we see that a lot, and that's several times the chief and other officers are asked to come and speak to the community, and also even in COCC and some of the schools around the area. And I don't know if you knew, but our SROs actually teach classes at the high school. So they teach some different classes, and we have that community interaction. I think that's due in large part to our professionalism. So the department right now has 64 total people working there. 50 of those are sworn officers. Now we break those down into three categories just for ease of understanding. Patrol, which is our core function, and you see up there that comprises just several different parts to include our community service officers and also our school resource officers in the airport. Investigations is doing most of that kind of long-term, more in-depth investigations. They work a lot with DHS and some of those child welfare cases, but that includes our street crimes, which has a lot of the low-level drug enforcement and property crime, and then also works a lot with the other agencies in the area on the bigger drug crimes. And then something we're really proud of is the continued work we're doing in computer forensics. I think everyone knows, a cell phone is now a computer. I mean, I can remember my first cell phone was there was no texting, you had to pay for your plan. That's totally different now. So I'm having the ability to do that to the department, and as we continue to grow and work in those programs, we'll do that more in this next year coming. But in 2021, we did work really in depth in that area, especially investigations. And then admin. It's funny how much paperwork we generate at the police department. 70% of what we do is actual paperwork. It never makes it in the advertising videos. no one knows about it, but you have to be a great typist and be a great communicator to be a police officer. But all that information has to go somewhere. And so the admin division takes care of that and is able to work with the courts to make sure that information is getting where it needs to go and that we're able to try cases successfully. So moving along, a lot of training goes into what we do. There's several different certificates. There's some annual training that's required through the Department of Public Safety and Standards. That training is not extensive. As you see, it's 8 hours to include use of force and firearms, also ethics, and then CPR and first aid. Currently at the police department, we actually have about 60 to 70 hours of training. So we actually have mandatory training on a monthly or quarterly basis. And on top of that 60 to 70 hours, we spend a lot of time reviewing current cases and different situations that law enforcement's encountering across the country, as well as just like updates on case law, updates on Senate bills. Like those will all come out in like a briefing training. So there's several hours we go through a year in training, and there's other requirements for that in terms of time and how much that takes. But we do a lot of that. And a lot of that too, which has been really cool over the last several years, has been incorporated scenarios. So a lot of what we do now is we take different issues or different trends we're seeing, and then we plug those into what we're doing in the field. So for instance, this last training we had, EVOC, and you see a picture of that up there. That's us getting ready to do some different like vehicle maneuvers and whatnot, but part of that training had to do with specifics on how to do a high-risk traffic stop, and just refreshing our officers on the best way to talk to someone and to talk them out of a vehicle, and then the best way to bring them back safely and take them into custody with the utmost focus on safety of the community and our officers. So we spend a lot of time trying to work through those issues and really develop a real understanding about how we want to interact with people to keep the community safe. Chief?
Thanks. All right, so kind of some highlights. So I talked about the stuff that was new in 2021. I briefly touched on those new positions and promotions. So again, not all technically in 2021, but throughout the pandemic, 20 swearing-ins. So we want to highlight that. New record staff. We brought in new community service officers. And both of those hires with new records and new CSOs, we were actually able to hire folks that are bilingual in Spanish. So we're really excited about that, and that will kind of dovetail into when I get to number 4 down there. And again, Chief Dave Tarbett retired at the end of 2021, and so that obviously set up a cascade of several upward promotions, which is always exciting at a police department. Obviously, I stand before you tonight as the new police chief, and Erin Wells is here as our new captain. We also have April Huey, who became our new lieutenant, and that was great. She's the first female lieutenant in our history. And then other promotions and hirings beyond that. So we're really excited about those new positions and promotions. New public safety facility. Hopefully you've heard about that recently with the news and some of the presentations that we're doing. But again, in 2021, with council's direction, we were able to acquire some land, 8 acres on the north end of Redmond, and procure a design firm for a needs assessment. And we're moving forward with that project. And that includes a GEO bond that is going to be on the ballot on May 17th. And then we had our first in-house supervisor academy. We do provide a lot of training, which Captain Wells just talked about, but we had never been able to host our own in-house supervisor training. And once you become a supervisor, so a sergeant or above, it is mandated by the state to meet a certain number of leadership training hours. And so we wanted to help put one of those on. And so a bunch of us brought experience from outside agencies and other things we have, and we set up our own in-house supervisor academy, and we're able to get 12 staff members through that training, and they were actually able to get 24 hours of leadership training that was recognized by the state and DPSST, so we were very proud of that, and we hope to continue that program in 2022. And again, as I mentioned earlier, with some of the new staff we hired, we do have people that are bilingual in Spanish, and they've been very helpful now on our social media outreach. And so now when we post something on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, we're a little bit late to the program. We just got our Instagram account a couple weeks ago, so I know that makes my kids super happy. But now we're able to post stuff in both English and in Spanish, so any sort of community messages, hopefully we're reaching more of our community through that. I just would like to add, in addition to that, we also have an officer we recently hired who's also certified in American Sign Language, so that's a great addition to our team as well, so we're very proud of that.
So highlights, and this is really some of the cool stuff we've had happen at the PD that I get to share with you again. We talked about, I know the form, the picture shows it in a different format, but since we were talking about the Spanish deal, I think it's really neat that we're able to provide just a translation for everything we're doing now. So I don't know if you know, we do our daily online reporting, so you can come in and make a police report without talking to an officer. You can do that online. We provide those in Spanish now. All the forms that we have are currently being switched over to Spanish. So it's really neat to me to be able to say, hey, if you're Spanish, we want to communicate with you too, as well as the American Sign Language piece. That's super cool. Also, we did monitor several protests. I think it was just a year like that for everyone across the country, but we had a lot of success in working with multiple different people on protests regarding, God, I just lost my train of thought. But protests regarding George Floyd, masks, a variety of different topics. Sorry, I was like, I had it, but I lost it. But just a variety of different topics. We had a lot of success there, and I think that was due in large part to the way we worked with the different people putting on those protests and trying to give everyone a space to say what they needed to say and keep those doing that safe. And both parties, oftentimes, we had a really favorable turnout for those. And finally, with community engagement, a few years ago, we started the National Night Out program. This year, Redmond was 8th in the country for cities that are 15,000 to 50,000. I know we put a lot of effort into that, and we had a really favorable response, again, just working with the community to bring those things to the people we serve. And so that was a lot of fun for us. In terms of key partnerships that we continue to maintain that we'd like to highlight for you, we continue to work heavily with mental health. Specifically, we work a lot with MCAT, the Mobile Crisis Assessment Team, and Deschutes County Behavioral Health as we continue to see a rise in mental health, people experiencing mental crisis. So we work with them quite a bit. That also adds into different multidisciplinary teams, like the adult threat assessment, where we're able to bring these things forward and approach them from a group standpoint, trying to resolve those conflicts before they become greater issues. We also continue to work in the major incident team. That's a team comprised of the Tri-County area detectives. Most recently, you saw that team called out in our own traffic crash off of Canal. And several officers from different agencies assisted with that, and we continue to see those on a regular basis and respond to those things several times this past year. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk to you about call types. There's a lot of information on this slide. I think a couple things I wanted to point out is, one, we continue to see traffic complaints, person stops and parking, kind of being the number one area people call into, or that's addressed yearly and people have concerns about. But what we are seeing now, which is of note, is that on the bottom, in terms of trespasses, welfare checks, MVAs, and mental health calls, those have all increased quite a bit. Mental health calls actually made the top 10 list for the first time ever. And that area has continued to increase every year since we've taken that stat. Every year since we've begun to record how many mental health calls we respond to, that area has continued to grow. But what's important about those numbers I'd like to share with you is that of the bottom 3, 4, those are the ones that take the most amount of time. So although you may look at it and say, hey, traffic's going down a little bit, that sounds great, but the calls that take the longest amount of time are the ones that are increasing. Which affects our ability to kind of be creative, but I think we're doing a pretty good job with those areas, as there are some of those major concerns as they are going down. That's you, right?
Yep. And just to kind of continue on where Erin was talking about, looking at these statistics, it just kind of gives you the breakdown of the average officer time spent by type of call. And that first one, I know we kind of abbreviated there, so that stands for like hit and run and motor vehicle accidents. And you can imagine a lot of time those do take a long time because we have to get there, investigate the crash, wait for the tow trucks, get the road reopened, things like that. So those can take some time, and they kind of go down. But I want to highlight one thing, which is we covered over 28,000 calls for service last year. And some of these calls, even though they might show lower, just depending on the circumstances of the specific call, it could take a lot longer. A lot of times, the welfare checks, the AMI, the mental health calls, the suicide calls, those can actually take much longer if it is, truly somebody in crisis. And so I just wanted to highlight that, depends on the type of call. Sometimes we get them wrapped up in 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes they can take upwards of 2 hours. This is just kind of an average. And again, it's important, I think, for us to note that we are looking at, trying to figure out ways to, have call reduction strategies and more efficiently deploy our officers to certain types of calls, and always looking for ways to become more efficient so we have more time for proactive activities.
So use of force is another area that we spend a lot of time looking at and we've addressed over the years. As you can see in 2021, like the chief said, we had 28,000 calls or contacts, 20,003 calls for service. Of those, we had 32 force responses. And so the percentage there of the time we used force was just over a tenth of a percent. And by comparison, nationwide, it's around 2%. So we're well under the nationwide average for use of force. Although it's interesting, you look at those numbers, and we did have an increase in 2021. I think there's a few things that could account for that. One is that we did have an increase in our contacts with people who were intoxicated. So if you look at those numbers, what it doesn't show is that 72% of the 2021 uses of force had to do with those who were intoxicated or experiencing mental health crisis. So those are the most difficult people to communicate with at times, especially when you're trying to, help them or try to take them somewhere to get them the help they need. So I think, if you were to look at those statistics and say, well, there has been an increase, I think that we had an increase in those type of calls. I think we also, with COVID and coming out of COVID, we've had some changes there, more person contacts. There's been some statutory things that have changed in how we apply the law with person stops and whatnot that have changed some of those numbers. So there's just multiple issues that play into that. But the key thing that I think, as I look at that to take away, is that the majority of our contacts that result in some kind of use of force is with those who are intoxicated or who are experiencing mental health crisis. On a side note, I think we might talk about, or we have talked about a little bit, CIT and how many of our officers are CIT trained. And so we're continuing to try and address how we talk to people who are in crisis through our CIT program. In fact, most recently in next week or the week after, we're able to have our first CIT class in over a year, 2 years. We have officers attending that. Our goal is to have the department 100% trained in crisis response, which is what CIT is. That's the program and how we respond to it in the training. It's a week-long training. So we're continuing to address those issues and continuing trying to do our best in that area. Just a quick picture of the department. I just wanted to point out the highlighted areas for you. You're going to see 6 vacancies up there. We don't actually have 6 vacancies. We have 4, but the reason there's 6 is because 2 officers right now are either in background or waiting for an academy class. So although we do have that many, only 4 are actually vacancies that we're looking to currently fill. Once we get those filled, we're going to look at trying to address beefing up our patrol teams. I think we talked about a few minutes ago just about our core function is patrol. And so we're trying to beef up those teams. Also traffic, we talked about traffic being the number 1 concern for citizens. So trying to get those teams full, and that's going to happen hopefully as we get these vacancies completed. Also, we already talked about Lieutenant Huey. Our training continues to be a key potential there, and Sergeant Hicks is doing a great job. And then our computer forensics, like I explained earlier, is all part of that package in terms of our agency and who's working with us right now.
All right, so looking to 2022, I mean, it's already April, so right, we're well into 2022. But what we're looking at is, again, trying to figure out how can we come out of the post-pandemic and continue that community engagement. A lot of things went virtual, as we all know. I mean, we're sitting here for the first time tonight in person, which is, I think, pretty exciting and pretty cool and pretty great. I'm a social guy, so I like that. So I'm really looking forward to that community engagement. We've already seen some of that over the last few weeks with getting out, doing different presentations to different community groups and meeting different folks, and it's just great to be able to meet in person, so we want to continue to do that. Again, looking at staffing. As we all know, Redmond is, one of the fastest growing cities in the state. We seem to be, growing, it says 2,000 to 4,000 people a year, and I think we're even surpassing that. So trying to look at how we can keep up with that staffing. Again, Captain Wells highlighted, we currently have 4 vacancies. We're doing our best through recruitment to fill those. But we need to look to the future and make sure that we are in a position that we can continue to match the staffing needs that this growth is going to bring to us. kind of highlighted some of these partnerships, some of our new partnerships. Lighthouse Health and Wellness is a new app we're looking into, and it's federally funded, so it would be free for us to add, and it's a way to continue our focus on total health and wellness for our police officers. Not only engage them with physical health, but mental health and wellness. Talks about wealth management, diet, kind of everything there. So we're looking at that, try to help give our officers and give all of our staff more resources. They can hopefully stay healthy, happy people. If they're healthy and happy at work, then they're going to give our community and our citizens better service. And we kind of already talked about, again, our partnership with MCAT. It's very strong. We're very proud of our partnership with MCAT and Deschutes County Behavioral Health. And we are going to be adding a computer forensics detective out at our computer forensics lab at Deschutes County at their lab. So that's exciting because that'll be our first person we've put out at the lab. And again, like Captain Wells mentioned, law enforcement, all of our investigations almost always involve some sort of computer forensics because everybody has a phone, and it takes a lot of expertise and equipment to look at those phones. And then again, lastly, the public safety facility. Very excited about this opportunity. Very excited about the bond in May. We're hoping that can go through. But again, we've just been out, reaching out to the community, trying to answer questions, trying to present facts on what our current facility is and what this new facility could bring to the community. And I'll just kind of go to this last slide here. It's just kind of an overview. Again, I mentioned council directed us to purchase 8 acres on the north side of town at 2983 Northwest Canal Boulevard, up there off of exit 119, so we're really excited about that. That's enough space, again, and this kind of conceptual design kind of shows you that's enough space that we're going to be able to grow and expand with the city of Redmond, and as it continues to grow and expand. And it's going to allow us to address kind of some multiple deficiencies that our current building has, and hopefully position us not only for 2022 and 2023 and 2024, and hopefully if the bond passes we get it built, but looking 30 and 40 years into the future, position us to be successful and to grow and evolve with the community. So that's the end of our presentation, and we are here for any questions.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Thanks, Captain. Any questions, Counselor Fitch?
First, a comment. I had a chance to talk to Ken Kerfoot this morning, and he is a former police officer and is now on the board of the fire district. And he wanted to echo that he's never seen the relationship between the police and the fire closer and even better than before. But I did have a couple questions. One is, unfortunately, I probably get a couple of times a month people coming in who've been scammed, and you don't know what to do with them. What's the police department's approach to people who've been scammed?
Yeah, so it's kind of a multiple-pronged approach, I guess. We do have a lot of, when we see an alert going through the area, we will try to put it out on our social media, kind of a scam alert, and kind of highlight what that scam is. So I think a lot of times we'll see that on our social media, and if it's really large, we'll put it out through a media release as well, and sometimes you'll see those alerts on Z21. Secondly, we'll try to work it initially, and if it looks like it does have some sort of local tie, maybe something that we could actually prosecute, we will investigate it. Unfortunately, as you know, a lot of these scams originate, out of country, overseas. That's kind of beyond our capability. So we refer them to the national website, which I think is ic3.gov. Yeah. And we refer them to there, and that's where they can make their report. That's tracked, and at least they have a report and a case number. So if they do have a way of getting compensated either through insurance or through their banking institution, they can do that.
And then the last question I had is, in the past, there's been some reports of problems with 911, and I'm just wondering what your current experience is with 911. Are there any glitches, or do you have any issues with 911 here locally?
I would say no. Locally, I think the Deschutes County 911 I think we're very fortunate to have them in our backyard. We have a great partnership with them, and I know they're starting to draft their strategic plan, so I don't want to get ahead of that. I've been a little bit of a part of that, but I know they're looking to implement some new technology that we're seeing in other parts of the country. So I think what they offer and what they offer our citizens is only going to get better in the future. But yeah, I feel like they do a great job.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Chief. Thanks, Captain.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, my allergies